The mysterious disappearance. Ella had always been an ordinary girl. She was a quiet young woman, living in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Her days were filled with simple pleasures: reading books, taking walks by the lake, and spending time with her family. Her life was nothing extraordinary, but it was peaceful. It was the kind of life that most people took for granted, until one day, everything changed. It all started with a phone call. It was a Friday evening, and Ella had just finished a long day of work at the local library. She was about to make herself dinner when her mother's voice came through the phone line, shaky and nervous. "Ella, there's something wrong. I haven't seen you in a while. Where are you?" But that wasn't the most terrifying part. It wasn't the worry in her mother's voice, or the unusual feeling in the air. It was the fact that Ella's mother couldn't remember the last time she had spoken to her. Ella was confused. She remembered exactly where she had been the past few days. She had gone to work, visited a few friends, and gone home. Nothing out of the ordinary. But as she looked around her apartment, she felt like something wasn't right. A strange feeling crept up her spine. She tried to call her mother back, but the phone line was dead. It felt as if the world around her was starting to slip away. The next day, Ella was nowhere to be found. Her friends called her. Her family searched the neighborhood, but there was no trace of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The police were called in to investigate, but they found nothing. No evidence of a break-in, no signs of struggle, just an empty apartment and a series of unanswered questions. As days turned into weeks, the mystery of Ella's disappearance deepened. The news spread quickly, and soon, it was a story that gripped the entire town. People whispered about what might have happened to her. Some thought she had run away. Others believed she had been kidnapped. But no one truly knew. Theories ranged from the plausible to the bizarre, but no one had any concrete answers. Ella's family was devastated. Her mother spent days crying, her father constantly checking her bedroom, hoping for some sign that she would come home. But there was nothing. The more time passed, the less likely it seemed that Ella would ever return. It was as if she had become a ghost, lost to the world. The police were baffled. They had no leads, no clues to follow. Forensics found nothing out of the ordinary in her apartment. There were no signs of forced entry or any indication that someone had taken her. It was like she had just disappeared into thin air. There were no strange footprints, no mysterious vehicles, no witnesses, just silence. But then, just when the case seemed to fade into nothing, a strange piece of evidence was discovered. A group of hikers, deep in the forest on the outskirts of town, found something odd. It was a piece of cloth, torn and stained, hanging from a tree. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an old scrap of fabric. But when the hikers examined it closer, they realized that it was part of Ella's favorite jacket, the jacket she had been wearing the last time anyone saw her. The hikers reported the discovery, and soon, the police were out searching the area. They combed through the forest, looking for anything that could lead them to Ella. But the deeper they searched, the more they realized that something was wrong. There were no other signs of her. No footprints, no sign of struggle, just an eerie emptiness. Days turned into weeks again, and the search efforts dwindled. The town began to move on, the mystery of Ella's disappearance slipping away into the background. It was as if she had never existed at all. Her friends went back to their daily lives, her family tried to heal, and the world moved on. But the mystery of Ella's disappearance never truly left the town. People still talked about it in hushed voices. Some believed she had been taken by someone. Others thought she had left voluntarily. But deep down, everyone knew that something far stranger had happened, something that no one could explain. As the years passed, the story of Ella's disappearance became just another unsolved mystery. But one day, something extraordinary happened. A report came in from a small village across the ocean, far away from the town where Ella had vanished. The report mentioned a woman who had been found wandering alone, with no memory of where she had been or how she had gotten there. The description was unsettlingly familiar. It was Ella, but she didn't return the way everyone expected. She wasn't the same girl who had disappeared years ago. She had changed. Her eyes were different, and her voice carried an unfamiliar tone. It was as though she had lived a lifetime in those missing years, but not on Earth. Her disappearance had left the world with more questions than answers. But now, the time had come for those questions to be answered. If she would let anyone get close enough to uncover the truth. The return of Ella, or something else. Ella's return wasn't the joyous reunion everyone expected. Instead, it was unsettling, like a dream you can't quite remember but can't shake off either. The woman who walked into the town square looked like Ella. But something was wrong. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now carried a haunted emptiness. She seemed fragile, as though the years of absence had twisted her into someone entirely new. Her once familiar voice sounded distant, like an echo of the person she had been. The townspeople were shocked. It had been years since Ella disappeared, and to see her now, standing in front of the very library she had worked in, the very streets she had walked, felt like something out of a strange, surreal dream. Her mother was the first to find her. She rushed to Ella, tears streaming down her face, calling her name. But Ella didn't seem to recognize her at first. Her gaze was unfocused, as if she was seeing something else entirely. "Ella, it's me. Mom," her mother cried, grasping her daughter's hand. But there was no response. Ella stared at her, blankly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know you." Her mother recoiled, a chill running down her spine. She had hoped for so long to see Ella again, but the woman standing before her wasn't the daughter she remembered. Ella's memories of Earth seemed to be fading, like a half-forgotten dream. She struggled to recall anything from her life before the disappearance. Nothing made sense, and the more she tried, the more her mind seemed to slip away, as if something was blocking her memories. Ella was taken to the local hospital for a medical checkup, but nothing was physically wrong with her. Her health was fine, her body unscathed, but there was one thing the doctors couldn't explain: her strange behavior. She spoke in cryptic phrases, her eyes often staring at nothing, as if lost in another world. She spoke of strange visions, of dark skies, and a place far beyond Earth, of things that didn't fit into the reality the town knew. She told them that she had no memory of how she got there, only that she had been called back. What did she mean by that? Who was calling her? Was it just the trauma of her abduction, or was something else pulling her towards something she couldn't understand? The authorities were puzzled. The story of Ella's sudden return was sensational. News reporters swarmed the town, and people came from all over, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. But the more they learned about her, the more questions arose. Her reappearance wasn't just a miracle. It was a mystery. She had come back with more than just amnesia. There was an energy about her now, something different, something alien. People began whispering that Ella wasn't the same person who had vanished years ago. Something had happened to her, something beyond their understanding. But the strangest part was what Ella herself didn't know. She had no idea why she had returned. She couldn't explain why she was here, or what had happened to her during the years she was gone. But she knew something was calling her back to a place she couldn't remember. All she knew was that she felt incomplete, like a puzzle with a missing piece. And as the days went by, that feeling of emptiness only grew stronger, leading her to question everything about herself and about the bond that now seemed to link her to a world beyond Earth. The world had welcomed her home, but Ella had yet to welcome herself. What was waiting for her in the life she had left behind, and what was waiting for her in the strange, otherworldly memories that still haunted her every thought? Ella's return was just the beginning. The questions were only starting, and the answers, if they ever came, might turn out to be more terrifying than anyone could imagine. A bond with an alien Rapunzel. As Ella settled back into her life, her memories remained a blur, but there were flashes, brief, vivid moments that pierced through the fog of her mind. She began to see faces in her dreams, faces that weren't human. A being, tall and slender with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, lingered in her thoughts. It felt like this figure was reaching out to her, pulling her into a past she couldn't remember clearly. Every time Ella closed her eyes, she could almost hear a voice, not with her ears but deep in her mind. It was soft, distant, yet undeniable. The voice spoke her name. Ella. It wasn't a dream. She felt it, the pull. One evening, while standing in front of the mirror in her old bedroom, something extraordinary happened. Ella's long, dark hair, the hair that once felt like a simple part of her human self, began to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. The glow was almost imperceptible at first, but it grew brighter with every passing second. Ella's heart raced as she watched it in awe and confusion. It was as if something was alive inside her hair, responding to her every thought, to the quiet whispers in her mind. In a moment of panic, she grabbed a lock of her hair, feeling it ripple with a strange energy that seemed to hum with power. Suddenly, the memories hit her all at once. A place, a world unlike anything on Earth, strange skies, alien landscapes, endless stretches of fields bathed in a golden light. And standing there, beneath the unfamiliar sun, was the being, Rapunzel, as Ella had called her in the fragments of memory that surfaced. She was beautiful, but not in the way Ella understood beauty. The alien's long hair, like shimmering strands of light, held an undeniable power, something far greater than anything Ella had ever felt before. It was through that hair that their bond had been formed, a bond that tied Ella to her in ways that were not just emotional, but physical, almost spiritual. Ella's heart raced as she remembered the sensation of Rapunzel's hair wrapping around her, holding her, protecting her. The touch was not like anything she had known before. It was warm, it was familiar, but also alien, as though something deeply other had become part of her. They had shared a connection, unspoken, yet undeniable. But why? What had Rapunzel wanted from her? Why had she allowed Ella to return? Ella staggered back from the mirror, clutching her head. The memories were overwhelming, filling her mind with a flood of emotions she couldn't comprehend. And then, the voice, the one she had heard in her dreams, spoke again, clearer this time. "Come back to me, Ella. The bond cannot be broken." Ella froze. Her legs buckled, and she sank to the floor. She hadn't imagined it. Rapunzel was calling her back. But why now? Why after all these years? She tried to push it away, to focus on the life she had once known. Her family, her friends, the people who had welcomed her home. But the bond was undeniable. Rapunzel was out there, somewhere, waiting for her. As the days passed, the strange connection grew stronger. Ella couldn't escape it, no matter how hard she tried. Every night, the pull became more intense. She felt her mind slipping, like pieces of her identity were being pulled away by the very bond that had once tied her to Rapunzel. It was as if Ella was not just remembering her past life. She was becoming it again. One night, as Ella lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the room seemed to shift. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and contorting in strange ways. Her hair, once so ordinary, began to glow again. And she could feel it, the connection, reaching out across the stars. She was no longer just a human girl. She was something more, something far beyond her understanding. With trembling hands, Ella reached for her phone and typed a single message to her mother. "I have to leave again." The words felt like a betrayal, yet deep in her heart, Ella knew this was the only way she could understand the bond that had brought her back. And whatever it was, whatever force was behind it, it was calling her home. Ella had always thought of herself as a human. But as her mind connected with Rapunzel's again, she began to question everything she thought she knew about herself, about what she had been through, and what was waiting for her in the depths of space. Could she fight the call of the alien bond? Or would she return to the world she once knew, to the strange and powerful being who had once held her close? The hidden truth of the alien bond. Ella could no longer deny it. The connection to Rapunzel, the alien she had once thought of as nothing more than a distant memory, was more than just a bond. It was a tether, a force that ran deeper than blood, deeper than any human connection. As each day passed, the pull grew stronger, and so did the feelings that came with it: fear, longing, but also an undeniable sense of purpose. The town began to notice how different she had become. She spoke less and less about her life before her disappearance. Her family grew increasingly worried, noticing the blankness in her eyes and the way she sometimes seemed to drift away in the middle of a conversation, as though her thoughts were far, far away. Ella's mind was always elsewhere, on the alien world, on Rapunzel, on the strange bond that was rapidly consuming her. One evening, as Ella wandered through the forest near her home, a place she had always visited when she wanted to clear her mind, she felt it. A pulse, a surge of energy, like a quiet whisper in the air, calling her name. Ella. It was Rapunzel's voice again, more powerful now, filling her thoughts. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a force that seemed to wrap around her, pulling her deeper into a past she barely understood. She followed the sensation, knowing it was the answer she sought, even if it scared her. The trees in the forest began to twist and bend unnaturally as Ella walked deeper into the woods. The sensation in the air grew heavier, more suffocating, as though the forest itself was aware of her presence. But Ella couldn't stop now. She had to find out the truth about Rapunzel, the truth about the alien bond that had tied them together. At the edge of the forest, near an old abandoned clearing, she stopped. The air shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Her heart pounded as she looked around, trying to make sense of the strange, ethereal energy that surrounded her. And then, it happened. The ground beneath her feet trembled. The air crackled with static electricity. In front of her, a figure emerged from the shadows, a being with long, flowing hair that seemed to glow like starlight, her features sharp and beautiful in a way that was not human. Rapunzel. The alien stood there, silent and still, as though waiting for Ella to make the first move. Ella took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat. Everything in her body screamed to turn and run, but she couldn't. She needed to know what this was all about, needed to understand why she had been chosen, why she had been brought back. Rapunzel's voice filled the air once more. "You've been chosen, Ella," she said, her voice smooth but full of something ancient and powerful. "Not by chance, but by design. You are the key to everything." Ella's mind raced. The key to what? What do you want from me? Rapunzel took a step closer, her presence overwhelming. "You are not just human. You were chosen long ago, when the bond between us was first formed. When I found you, I saw something in you that others couldn't see. Something within you is special." Ella's eyes narrowed. "Special? What do you mean?" Rapunzel smiled softly, though there was a coldness to it. "You are the bridge between our two worlds, Ella. Your mind, your spirit, is unlike anything the humans or the aliens have ever seen. You have the power to unlock things that could save or destroy both your kind and mine." Ella felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't understand. "What are you talking about? What power?" "The bond between us," Rapunzel continued, her eyes glowing faintly, "was not a coincidence. It was a fusion of your essence and mine. You were changed, Ella. You were made to be something greater than you were, a human body, but with alien potential, a mind that could hold both worlds within it." The words hit Ella like a punch to the gut. She staggered back, her head spinning. You made me part alien. I'm not human anymore." Rapunzel's gaze softened, though her voice remained firm. "You are both. You always have been. But the time has come for you to embrace what you truly are, what you were always meant to be." Ella struggled to grasp the enormity of what Rapunzel was telling her. She wasn't just a victim of an alien abduction. She wasn't just a lost human who had stumbled back into the world she had left behind. She had been changed. Something deep inside her had been altered, and she was now part of something much larger than herself. The bond, the connection to Rapunzel, was not just a memory or a fleeting moment. It was a calling, a purpose. Ella's mind reeled with the weight of the truth. What did this mean for her? What did it mean for the humans who had welcomed her back? "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Ella asked, her voice shaky. Rapunzel's expression hardened slightly. "I couldn't. You weren't ready. But now it's time for you to decide. Ella, you have the power to change everything. The future of both worlds rests on your shoulders." Ella was no longer the same person she had been when she first walked into the forest. She was something else now, something powerful, something torn between two worlds. And the hardest part was yet to come. The decision to either embrace her alien heritage and step into a new future, or reject it and forever lose the connection that had transformed her life. But one thing was clear: she was no longer just human. She was something far more than she had ever imagined. And the choice she made would shape the fate of both Earth and the alien world she had once called home. Human versus alien. The ultimate struggle. Ella stood in the clearing, her mind buzzing with the weight of Rapunzel's words. The truth was too much to process. She wasn't just a human girl who had been abducted and returned. She was something new, something dangerous. The realization hit her like a storm, and she felt both a sense of dread and an undeniable surge of power. The bond that had connected her to Rapunzel for years wasn't a mere memory. It was a weapon, a force capable of shaping the future of both worlds. As Ella struggled to make sense of everything, the world she had known began to unravel. News of her return had spread like wildfire, and soon the authorities were closing in. Not just local law enforcement, but government agents from across the globe. They had heard whispers of her transformation, of the strange abilities she had begun to display. People had seen her walking into the woods and emerging hours later, her eyes glowing faintly. There were rumors, but no one dared to speak openly. Not yet. But as the days passed, the pressure mounted. Ella was no longer just a missing person returned to her family. She was a symbol of something far bigger, something that could either save humanity or destroy it. Governments, military forces, and shadow organizations began to take notice, all hoping to claim her for themselves. They saw her as both a threat and a treasure, a human-alien hybrid whose powers could either protect the Earth or destroy it. Ella's mother tried to protect her, but even she could feel the danger closing in. She knew something had changed in her daughter, something deeper than mere memories. Ella was becoming something else, someone with abilities far beyond what any human could comprehend. But what could she do? Ella was not the same girl who had walked out of the door years ago. The girl who had once been ordinary was now a walking weapon of alien potential. And then the calls came in. The military. They offered protection, but at a price. Ella was told they could help her control the power inside her, but only if she agreed to cooperate. But deep down, Ella knew it wasn't just about helping her. They wanted to harness her abilities for their own gain, to use her as a tool in a war she didn't even understand. They were scared, and fear, as Ella quickly learned, would lead them to make dangerous choices. And then there was Rapunzel. When Ella reached out to her once more, the alien's presence filled her mind like a flood of images, visions of a world torn apart by conflict, of alien races that had fought for centuries, each seeking domination over the stars. Rapunzel's voice was calm but urgent. "You cannot trust them, Ella. They will use you for their own desires, for their power. You are the bridge between our worlds, but you must make a choice. Your people will fight to control you, but you must decide whether you will stay or help them destroy their own future." Rapunzel's words haunted Ella, growing more vivid as the days went on. She could feel the pressure mounting from every side. On one hand, there were the humans, her family, her home, the life she had once known. But on the other, there was the alien world, the bond that tied her to Rapunzel, and the terrifying power that pulsed within her. It was clear both sides wanted her, but for very different reasons. The humans, fearful of what she had become, wanted to use her abilities as a weapon against any threat, alien or otherwise. They saw her as the key to ensuring humanity's survival in a universe they didn't understand. But Ella could feel the coldness of their intentions. She wasn't a tool for war, and she wasn't someone who could simply be controlled. Her power was not theirs to wield. Rapunzel, on the other hand, had made it clear that she wasn't offering the simple solution. She wanted Ella to come back to the alien world, to become something greater, something that could change the fate of the stars. But Ella wasn't sure she could trust her completely. Rapunzel's calmness felt too calculated, her promises too alluring. What if there was more to her plans than what she let on? What if Rapunzel wanted to use Ella for her own purposes, not just to save her people, but to reshape the entire galaxy? The struggle within Ella was tearing her apart. She could feel the conflicting forces pulling at her, urging her to take sides. She loved her family, her people, but she also knew that she could never be fully human again. The alien part of her was too powerful, too real. The power inside her could tip the scales of war, and the choices she made would affect both Earth and the alien world. The time had come to act. Ella couldn't hide from the truth anymore. She had to choose whether to embrace the full extent of her power and leave Earth behind, or to fight for her humanity and face the consequences of alien forces trying to break through into their world. But in the end, there was no easy path. Every choice Ella made would be a betrayal to someone she cared about. And as the military forces closed in, preparing to take her by force if necessary, the alien world waited for her answer. Would she stand with her people, or would she walk away, embracing her new fate as the bridge between two worlds? In that moment, Ella realized one harsh truth. Her decision would shape the future of both Earth and the stars. And no matter what, there would be no going back. Betrayal and choices. The weight of the decision had never felt so heavy. Ella was standing at the precipice of a choice that could irrevocably alter the fate of two worlds, yet she could feel herself being pulled in 1,000 directions. The military, desperate to control her, had already begun moving into her town, setting up barricades and preparing for a confrontation. Her family was torn, caught between their love for her and their fear of the alien force she had become. But Ella's thoughts were no longer fully her own. Rapunzel had been calling more insistently now, her voice growing stronger in Ella's mind. "You have seen what they want to do with you, Ella. They will never let you go. You will be nothing more than a weapon in their hands. But you don't have to follow their orders. You don't have to be their pawn." Ella's head throbbed with the internal battle. She knew Rapunzel was right. The military's plans were becoming clearer by the day. They wanted her not just for her powers, but for the secrets she might unlock about alien technology. They would stop at nothing to bend her to their will. And in their hands, she could become something monstrous, a tool of war. Yet the lure of returning to Rapunzel, to the alien world, still gnawed at her. There, she would be free from the human constraints, free to explore the full extent of her powers. It was an escape, a promise of something more than the fractured life she had now. But it came with its own dangers. Rapunzel's assurances, though comforting, were not without their darker undertones. The alien queen had always been calm, but there was an unsettling edge to her words lately, an urgency that felt more like manipulation than care. The whispers in Ella's mind were growing louder, and with them, a truth she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The bond between them was not just a gift. It was a chain, an unbreakable connection that kept her tethered to something she was slowly realizing she might not fully understand. Rapunzel wanted more than just a partnership. She wanted a weapon, someone who would bridge the two worlds. Yes, but also someone who could dominate both. Ella wasn't just a savior in Rapunzel's eyes. She was a key to something far darker. And then, the worst betrayal hit. It came through an encrypted message sent to Ella's phone. the kind only a few trusted sources could have reached. It was from someone she never thought would betray her, her father. "I'm sorry, Ella." The message began, the words cutting her to the bone. "But they're coming for you. I didn't have a choice. I've told the military everything. They've promised to protect us, to keep the world safe. You're not just a danger to yourself anymore. You're a threat to humanity." Her father had turned her in. The crushing weight of betrayal hit Ella like a tidal wave. Her father, the one person who was supposed to love her unconditionally, had chosen the safety of the world over his own daughter. He had chosen to sacrifice her to the military in exchange for promises of protection. The realization stung worse than any physical wound. Her connection to Earth was growing frayed, but it still tied her to people she thought she could trust. People who had now turned their backs on her for the sake of fear and survival. Her heart pounded as she read the message over and over. She was no longer just running from alien forces. She was running from the very people she had tried to protect. They feared what she could become, and in their fear, they had condemned her to a life of conflict, betrayal, and the impossible choices that lay ahead. Anger surged through Ella. But it wasn't just anger at her father. It was anger at everything. The alien bond that had ensnared her, the people who saw her as a weapon rather than a person, the world that demanded she choose between saving it and destroying it. Everything was crumbling, and she was at the center of it all. She stepped outside, her mind racing. The military was closing in. Her father's betrayal burned like fire in her chest, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. If they wanted a weapon, they would get one. The connection to Rapunzel flared to life, as if sensing her inner turmoil. "Come to me, Ella," Rapunzel's voice whispered, more urgent now. "You know what you must do. The time is now." The decision was made, but not in the way anyone expected. Ella's eyes glowed faintly as her anger turned into something else. Something colder, more calculated. She was no longer the confused girl who had stumbled into an alien world years ago. She was something different now. Something powerful. She wasn't just running away from Earth. She was about to take a stand. The military forces had underestimated her. They thought they could capture her, control her, but they didn't understand the bond that ran deeper than any human force. They didn't understand that Ella was no longer a victim of circumstances. She was the one in control. In the darkness of the night, Ella made her choice. She would no longer be manipulated by either side. She was both human and alien, and in that moment, she realized that the future of both worlds didn't rest on her submission. It rested on her ability to break free of the chains that held her to both. And so, she prepared to fight. The world would see that Ella was not a weapon to be wielded. She would become the force that would determine the future, not as a pawn, but as the one who would decide the game. The final bond. Who will Ella choose? The night was thick with tension as Ella stood at the edge of the military barricades, her heart beating in time with the pulse of energy that surged through her. The glow in her eyes had deepened, no longer a subtle flicker, but a burning light that reflected her growing power. Her hand, trembling slightly, rested on the handle of the small, sleek device she had taken from one of the alien artifacts. It was the key, something Rapunzel had insisted was essential, something that could open the gates between worlds. But Ella wasn't sure she wanted to open those gates anymore. The wind howled through the trees, and she felt the eyes of the military watching her from a distance, waiting for her to make the first move. She could hear the murmurs, the whispering commands. They were preparing to take her by force, to contain her power. But they didn't understand. They thought she was a threat, an unknown weapon that needed to be controlled. They couldn't see the truth. Rapunzel's voice echoed in her mind again, urging her to come back, to embrace her true destiny as the bridge between worlds. The alien queen spoke with unwavering conviction, but Ella could sense something darker lurking beneath her words. Rapunzel's assurances of peace and unity had never been more persuasive, but now they felt hollow. She wasn't asking Ella to save the world. She was asking her to conquer it. "Ella, "You must come to me." Rapunzel's voice pressed, soft but insistent. "You are the only one who can lead both worlds into a new era. You are the only one who can unlock the true potential of your power." But even as Rapunzel spoke, Ella felt the weight of her father's betrayal, of the military's fear, pressing down on her. The world she had come from had betrayed her, but the alien world was asking her to leave it behind entirely. Both sides wanted her, but for very different reasons. And then there was the truth that weighed most heavily on her heart. What did she want? The alien power pulsing within her was undeniable. She felt it, like a beating heart inside her own chest, pulling her to Rapunzel. The promise of power, of freedom, of a life that was no longer bound by the fragile, broken world she had left behind, was tempting. But Ella had learned the hard way that power came at a price. Looking out over the horizon, the lights of the city dim in the distance, Ella felt the wind shift. The stars above seemed to flicker with anticipation, as though they were waiting for her to make her choice. And in that moment, she knew that she couldn't allow herself to be another tool for anyone. Not the humans, not the aliens. She had to choose for herself, and not out of fear or manipulation. The air around her shimmered with the energy that only she could feel. She took a deep breath, feeling the ancient alien power settle into her bones. It wasn't just the bond with Rapunzel. It was her power. She was the key, not because she was a weapon, but because she was a person who had the ability to shape what came next. And it wasn't a choice between two worlds. It was a choice to forge a third. A world where both sides, human and alien, could find peace if they were willing to seek it. Ella made her decision, and it wasn't an easy one. The military was closing in. Her father's betrayal still stung, but he was not the one she had to answer to anymore. Rapunzel's voice grew more urgent, but it only strengthened Ella's resolve. "No," Ella whispered, her voice calm but resolute. "I won't be your weapon." The energy around her flared as the device in her hand began to hum with power. She wasn't going to destroy either world, but she was going to stop them from using her as the key to their own ambitions. Her power was hers to control. It was time to end the cycle of fear and control, to stop being the bridge between two worlds that only saw conflict, and instead become the force that brought them together. In that final moment, as the alien energy surged within her and the military closed in, Ella raised the device into the air. It cracked open like a beacon, sending waves of light and energy cascading across the sky. The stars above seemed to pulse in response, as if the very universe was shifting. Ella didn't need to choose between the alien world and her human one. She would create a new path, one where both could coexist, where neither side would dominate. It wasn't about domination or submission, it was about balance. As the military forces closed in, Ella's power enveloped her like a shield, radiating outward in a blinding light. The soldiers froze, their weapons lowering, caught in the aura of peace that had suddenly descended upon them. They were no longer enemies. They were humans who, for a brief moment, glimpsed the possibility of a new future. And as Rapunzel's voice faded into the distance, Ella stood tall, her heart beating in time with the pulse of the stars. She had chosen, not as a weapon, not as a bridge, but as someone who could forge a path for both worlds to walk together. The bond had not been broken, but reshaped into something new. And with it, Ella had forged her destiny, not as a pawn, but as the one who would change everything.